Hello, the 31st here. Welcome back to another PowerPoint presentation. So recently I was watching Twilight Wings. I was doing some research for another video, this character design analysis for those two, when Oleana makes this remark.
Well, we thought Gigantamax Lapras' shell was a part of its body, but it's not, as it has a logarithmic spiral structure inside.
Now, there is a lot to unpack in that one short sentence. By all appearances, Oleana seems like a very capable scientist, so I have no reason to doubt that she's done her research. But if it is true, it has some major implications for the biology of Lapras and how we look at this creature. The general gist of what she's saying is that she has discovered that Lapras' shell isn't like a tortoise shell. You see, a tortoise's shell is actually its ribs and spine that have adapted to become this protective layer, resulting in this gnarly skeleton. Instead, what Oleana appears to be saying is that Lapras secretes its shell like a mollusk, and when it Gigantamaxes, it goes full gastropod and twists to form this spiral shell. And you know what? There is actually evidence in Lapras' design to support this. Basically what I'm saying is Lapras is a snail. Well, kinda. Obviously I don't know just by looking at it, but I'm assuming that Lapras is a vertebrate and that it has some bones, whereas actual mollusks don't. If we look at how mollusks, specifically gastropods, make their shells, they have an organ on their backs called the mantle. The mantle secretes materials that have been absorbed from the environment onto the snail's back that calcify and harden. The mantle adds to the shell incrementally, meaning that the shell grows from the base outward, like adding links to a chain. Obviously, at this stage, Lapras' shell isn't like a snail shell, but mollusk shell morphologies are incredibly diverse. And while a land snail shell might be pretty fragile, right? You could probably break it between your fingers. Ocean-dwelling ones are far sturdier, and something like an oyster, you would need a very hard rock in order to break. Now imagine something built like that, but the size of Lapras' shell, potentially inches thick. It would definitely be enough to protect Lapras from most threats. Mollusk shells are typically made of calcium carbonate mixed with some other stuff like proteins. Now, calcium carbonate can be very fragile, it's what chalk is made of, but if carbon chemistry can teach you anything, it's not the atoms you have, but how you use them, as you can make some pretty hard things using calcium carbonate. If we look at the morphology of Lapras' shell, the mantle would be beneath. Different amounts of deposition of these materials by different parts of the mantle is what leads to morphological differences in shells. Studies have shown that variable cell activity is probably to blame. But this basic idea explains the spikes on Lapras' back. These are just areas of greater deposition because of higher mantle activity. The key feature that makes Lapras' shell the product of secretion is the Gigantamax form. As Oleana said, the shell is a logarithmic spiral, which basically means this. Don't ask me to explain the maths, I don't know it, but these logarithmic spirals are found in nature. Crucially, the only time you'll really find them in an animal is in mollusks. From the prehistoric nautilus to the humble garden snail, the mollusks love their logarithmic spirals. It's the standard among gastropods. I'm not going to explain the details of how it's made because I barely understand it, there's too many equations. But like I said earlier, at its most basic level, different parts of the mantle function at different rates, which leads to variable amounts of shell growth. This isn't the only evidence though. Shells produced in this way can have ribs or spines. Ribs are flowy curves produced by the mantle regularly pushing and pulling the shell as it makes it over time, while spines are much harsher, obvious outcrops made by shorter periods of rapid shell growth. And as you can see, Gigantamax Lapras has exactly that. Spines close together because of short periods of rapid growth. To be honest, I wouldn't have thought that Lapras' shell functioned like this at all. But hearing Oleana talk about it and seeing what might be clear evidence in the Gen 8 design, it seems as though this is the direction they're pushing Lapras' biology in. Lapras secretes its shell like a mollusk, and when it Gigantamaxes, goes full gastropod and grows a coiled snail shell. But let's not forget something about mollusks. It's a group that includes the cephalopods, which are incredibly intelligent animals, that evolved eyes all on their own that are much better than ours. Besides the obvious implications this theory has, it also makes me really question the scientific community in the Pokemon world even more. If Oleana is the first person to discover Lapras, a Gen 1 Pokemon's shell isn't part of its body, just what exactly are they doing? And crucially, what are they allowed to do? Oleana discovered this by doing scans using technology. Before that, no one has ever tried to study Lapras' shell and never tried to remove one. Essentially what I'm getting at is I don't think the dissection of dead Pokemon is allowed, even though I'm pretty sure people definitely eat Pokemon. It seems like the only study researchers can do is the observation of a live specimen, which probably explains why they know so little. To be honest, it seems like the only real scientific progress and achievements that have been made in Pokemon are by crazy independent scientists and evil teams. Probably because they're not bound by whatever rules govern all the other research labs. This kind of has very serious implications on the science of the Pokemon world. It's also a good example to show that Pokemon and animal evolution probably aren't one-to-one. They're probably, different. Animals and Pokemon probably evolved differently throughout time. And that phenotypes aren't the be-all and end-all of relation. As you said, Lapras isn't going to be evolved from a tortoise because of its skeletal structure, not including its shell. In conclusion, Lapras is a snail. The end.